Today, on our brand new episode, we'll be talking to Siun, and we'll be talking about a very sensitive topic which touches on health, and it's neurodiversity, ADHD, and also self-compassion. Hi Siun, welcome to our podcast.
Hi Ashley, thank you for having me.
Can you just introduce yourself and tell us where you're from and how did you get about into talking about such issues as ADHD?
Sure. Well, I'm from the south of Ireland originally, from the southwest, and I left Ireland when I was about 20. I lived in the UK for years, and then I've always worked, actually. The only familiar thread throughout my life has been working with children and young adults with autism and ADHD and challenging behaviour and all that in different settings. When I moved to Prague in 2014, almost 10 years already, my goodness, I was working in an international school here as a personal assistant to a child with autism and with ADHD. And then I started to sort of notice things about myself that made me think, I wasn't sure, was it a lot of anxiety, a lot of rumination, things like that. And I wondered, is it from past trauma? But I'd had lots of therapy and thought I'd worked through a lot of stuff. So I went to see a psychiatrist who, unbeknownst to me, was actually assessing me for ADHD. When I went there, it was fairly open, but I think he could hear throughout the session, what was happening. And so I had a couple of further assessments, and sure enough, I was diagnosed with ADHD. I was 35, so it was a huge shock, because you kind of go through life thinking you're like everyone else, and then suddenly you think, actually, my brain is wired differently, and structurally parts of it are different to other people's brains. But everything made sense, made so much sense, and it was a really healing experience as well at the same time. Since then, I couldn't stop reading about ADHD. I just wanted to know as much as possible, and then I heard about ADHD coaching, and there's only a few places in the States where you can do this coaching training. I was lucky enough to be able to start that in 2020, and I finished last year.
Congratulations.
So thank you.
Wow, I don't know what to say, because then I'm thinking I might have it, or other people might have it and they don't even know. They just think they're depressed or suffering from anxiety, but there are deeper issues there.
There can be, yeah, absolutely. And often, especially women can be diagnosed with depression and anxiety when actually they have ADHD. 80% of people who are diagnosed with ADHD also are diagnosed with a co-occurring psychiatric condition, usually anxiety or depression or both. But they can mask, the anxiety and depression can mask other ADHD traits.
It's hard to tell.
It's hard to tell unless you have a thorough assessment, really, yeah.
I think the question now people are having is exactly what is this neurodiversity and how does it relate exactly to ADHD?
Sure. Well, the term neurodiverse was actually coined by an Australian sociologist called Judy Singer. And the way she defines neurodiversity is that everybody is neurodiverse. Because just like fingerprints, everybody's brain is different, which is really an amazing thing. So what she had in mind was like a general global thing. It is popularly used to describe people with autism, ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, Tourette's, different neurobiological things like that. Yeah, and then the more preferred term, I guess, is neurodivergent. It just means that your brain is not typical of like the general public. There's something different about your brain, so that makes you neurodivergent.
It doesn't mean that you're sick in any way. It just means your brain is different.
It's something that you're born with.
Okay.
So it's different to like a mental health condition. It's since you were before you were born, and you'll have it for life. Yeah.
And how does having ADHD affect your everyday life? How is it different from a normal person who does not have ADHD?
So from a person who doesn't have ADHD, they will experience the things that people with ADHD have, but not to the same extent or frequency. So a person with ADHD will often have a lot of difficulty with planning, organizing, timekeeping, self-control, controlling emotion. There's like I always forget, there are like 7 main areas called executive functions, but those are the top ones that people struggle with most. You know, constantly losing things, constantly being late, always spending time looking for stuff. Their mood changes in a moment. You know, you can suddenly feel very angry if you're late and you're giving yourself a hard time about it. Like that, a lot of people can find themselves in that, but it's persistent ADHD.
I saw like other people also talking about procrastination as how people with ADHD, it's a thing that they struggle with a lot. Can you maybe elaborate on that?
Yeah, sure. Well, procrastination absolutely is a huge thing in people with ADHD, and there are many different reasons. It's almost always emotional behind the procrastination, like perfectionism is a big thing, you know. So if there's something that you have to do, like a deadline for work, or I don't know, you're painting a picture or something like that, you can often put it off because if you're thinking through the lens of a perfectionist, you've created such a high standard in your own mind about it that even before you start the task, you've already gone, there's no point, I'm not ever going to get it as good as it should be, should in inverted commas. And you put yourself under so much pressure that you buckle even before you start. That's one kind of example of the emotions behind procrastination. And with ADHD, you know, if there's a lot of pressure there, like say if there's a young person who's doing school leaving exams, their parents are often, you know, come on, you need to study, you need to get an A, and in a child with ADHD, that's often enough for them to just, I'm not studying, I'm not studying anything. And you'll have a parent saying they're just sitting on the couch, they're just watching Netflix, they're not doing anything, they're lazy or whatever. The first thing comes to my mind is like, you can be sure that your child who's not studying or the person who's not meeting their work deadline, their mind is just full of thoughts. There's nothing relaxing or lazy about it. They're constantly going over it in their mind, the pressure.
Yeah, I just hear you right now describing some of the symptoms that people with ADHD have, and I'm thinking to myself, some of them I can relate to, and I think a lot of people can relate to, but does that mean that they have ADHD? Because sometimes you can just feel lazy and not do your project. So how do I know that I have ADHD, or it's just my trait and I'm just lazy?
So I guess it's the frequency, how often you find that happening. I mean, of course, it could be somebody without ADHD who isn't motivated by their job.
Exactly.
And I'm not interested in it, and I'm going to leave anyway in a few months or whatever. But with ADHD, it's certainly the frequency and the intensity. So with ADHD, we have less filters, to be very vague, less filters in our brain. So it's not easy, or it's not naturally available to us for our brain to go, you'll do it tomorrow instead. With ADHD, there'll be a lot of rumination, a lot of like, oh, I can't do anything, what's wrong with me? These people are waiting for me and I'm letting everyone down, and I'm blah, blah. And it just builds up and up into the inner critic in somebody with ADHD is the loudest voice of most of the time.
You self-sabotage, like you sabotage yourself from inside.
Yes, and there doesn't even need to be anybody around you who's criticizing you or something like that. Like with ADHD, it's very typical to do it yourself. And of course, you don't have to have ADHD to experience that, but it's such a strong feeling that it can govern everything in one's life. And if somebody's listening to this and thinking, oh my goodness, that sounds just like me, there are free questionnaires and stuff you can do online to test it. And obviously, you know, you can go and make an appointment somewhere and actually have an assessment if it's something that one feels really.
Yeah, I was about to ask the common signs that people have that kind of tell them that they have ADHD, but I think you've pretty much covered some of them. But are there more you can?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. The kind of more, I suppose, widely known ones are inattentiveness. There's 3 types of ADHD, and there's inattentive, which is mostly more with inward thinking, looking out the window, daydreaming a lot, zoning out in conversations, zoning out when doing work. And there's hyperactive type, which is, wanting to move a lot, often feeling like in adult, everything that has to be done in the day almost feels like an emergency, has to be done now. It's like this thing pushing in the back of your mind, feeling the need to move a lot, interrupting other people, speeding. Often people with hyperactive type will get a lot of speeding tickets. And there's...
Is that me? No, it's just, I'm thinking like I used to get a lot of speeding tickets, but I just love speeding. I know it's a bad thing.
And again, it doesn't mean that you have,
I don't know. Like I'm saying, how do you know? Most of the signs are, it's like most people have. So I don't know, where do you cut? Yes. Where do you draw the line? Like this is ADHD, this is just normal.
So if it's
behavior.
Impairing your daily life.
Okay. Oh yeah,
if it's having a negative impact on your daily life, then that's the way to do it. Like a lot of people will, impulsivity is a big thing, like interrupting and speeding and not being able to wait in line for the bathroom. Like if I go to the cinema, the movie's over and there's a long line, even if I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to make it home in time, I'm just like, I just can't spend 10 minutes waiting in a queue, it's too boring.
Yeah, it is. Oh yeah. And can you tell that your kids have ADHD? How can you tell from those signs as well?
It depends on the child's age, and ADHD is passed down. It's very heritable. There will be other people. There are genetic components of ADHD, and there will be other people in the family, parent and uncle, grandparents, or whatever. And I guess if the more you know about it yourself, the more you'll recognize things. Usually, it's flagged by a teacher or speech therapist or something like that. Somebody will say maybe you can get an assessment for your child, but very often there's a stereotype that boys have hyperactive ADHD and not inattentive, which is not true. It's often the children with predominantly hyperactive ADHD will get noticed because the way they conduct themselves in class will cause disruption and things, and might distract other kids and the teacher and things like that. And then on the other hand, inattentive boys and girls will often get missed. Like they'll fall through the net because they're really quiet, their grades might be quite low, and that might be something that the teacher notices, or when the teacher calls on them in class to answer a question, they often won't know what the teacher has asked them because they haven't been listening. Yeah. So they'll just get told off and then move on. And they won't get the support they need. So
the attention span is really, really short.
It depends on if you find something that really interests you, you could spend hours of solid focus on it. And that's like a paradox of ADHD, because people think you can't concentrate on anything and your focus capacity is really low, but actually if you find something that really interests you, then you have unlimited interest and concentration and focus.
Well, yeah, do you have common misconceptions or stereotypes that people usually label people with ADHD that you think should be addressed?
Certainly the difference between the kind of strong stereotype of the disruptive boy. Yeah. There are plenty of girls with hyperactive ADHD. They don't get the same attention or noticed as much. Yeah. And there are boys with inattentive type who don't get noticed. And basically there's I think there's some study going in now about the difference in how it presents in girls and in boys, because there is a difference, like there is in autism. Yeah, those, like that kind of stereotypes, and also that a person with ADHD can't hold down a job. That's another stereotype.
I feel like recently the community at large, like the society, has been aware and compassionate to people with neurodiversity or ADHD. I've seen shows even on Netflix. I don't know, there's this show called The Good Doctor. I don't know if that's ADHD or is autism. It's The Good Doctor. I think he has that as well. And there's another show I was watching about a kid, I forgot the name, also on Netflix, who had some neurodiversity problem. Should I say it's not a problem?
Yeah, there's a lot of talk about that as well.
It's not a misconception, right?
You could say traits.
Traits. Yes, it's not a problem. Yes, and it was a really good show, and I like that they're trying to do that as a society to show that you can have a good life and you can have a good job and everything. And I just think it's a good thing.
Yeah, certainly. With autism, there is a stereotype of having higher intelligence, but again, that's that's not always
the case.
That's a stereotype.
It's a stereotype.
So, but absolutely, you know, bringing people's awareness to neurodivergence is a fantastic thing, and seeing it in the mainstream
it's good.
It's really great.
I mean, these are the upsides of the woke culture, because you wouldn't see this back in the 90s.
No.
So the woke culture has the ups and the downs.
Sure. Yeah.
And my next question is, how does fostering self-compassion contribute to the well-being and the mental health of people with ADHD?
Mm-hmm. And it's such a great question, because it's sort of the biggest impact of having ADHD is how it makes you feel about yourself. And a lot of the time that is a very negative feeling. So the inner critic is very loud, usually the most dominant voice. The self-belief is really often very low, self-esteem in people with ADHD.
Do you think that is because you think you are different from the other people?
Yes, you know you're different. You grow up knowing you're different, but you look like everyone else, so you don't know, or you can't pinpoint what it is. But you're very aware because you see other people getting good grades at school, or never forgetting their homework, or never forgetting their lunch, you know, things like that. That happen to you all the time. Yeah, and it just goes in and makes you feel bad about yourself. And there's probably teachers saying, you could try harder, you're smarter, what's wrong with you? Or maybe even a parent, why can't you be more like your sibling? All of these things. And it's estimated that by the time they're 12, children with ADHD have received 20,000 negative messages, 20,000 more than their non-ADHD counterparts.
I can't even imagine that.
Yes, and so that becomes your internal dialogue. You think, oh well, this is me. This must be me then. I must be broken somehow, or there must be something really wrong with me. And it's really so sad. It's such a sad thing. Like sometimes, even working on self-compassion, sometimes for clients, they'll be like, I know myself when I was having therapy and told, how can you show yourself you love yourself? And I would feel almost angry. I've never thought of that. I don't know what that means. And it was just a really kind of frustrating, because I knew it was so far away as well, because I just thought I was worthless. When I thought I was stupid, I thought I didn't have anything to offer the world or anyone around me. To hear that, how can you love yourself? It almost made me feel sick. You know, it was such a strange kind of...
It makes me sick thinking about what you guys go through. It sounds like depression forever and ever and ever, because people with depression always hate themselves. I'm a nobody, I'm not worthy of anything, why would people love me, I don't deserve to live. It really sounds like that, and that hurts. It's
the sound of almost hopelessness, right? It's really sad. And of course, up until like the last 10 or 15 years, people didn't really know about ADHD.
I know, right?
Like you were saying.
Even I was saying I'm not exposed to this topic, also because of my background, where I come from in Southern Africa, or in Africa probably in general. I don't want to speak for the whole continent, but where I come from, in my neighborhood, in my community, we did not talk about ADHD. What is that? If you were different, we are just labeled as a special kid, and they send you to a special kids school.
Right.
It doesn't matter what you have, whether it's autism, whether it's ADHD, or whatever it is. They just put you there, and you sort yourself out. And it wasn't in a good way. You're going to a special school, or we are compassionate, or what. It was like you were cast out of the community.
Okay. Yes.
It's sad even talking about, but I was younger then, and I didn't realize. I was just growing up with the thought like, oh, going to a special school, you don't want to be sent there. No.
Sure, the social stigma.
Exactly,
right?
the
and so powerful.
Stigma around it.
And it still exists everywhere. I think the social stigma. You know, there are people who don't know about these things, or maybe are frightened to know, or grew up with a similar experience and maybe hear about it, ADHD or autism or something, and immediately the brain goes...
Especially autism. I think autism, the stigma is really huge. And I'm so glad that society is changing now, and realizing that people with autism can actually be even smarter than you, as you already said.
You know, it varies from person to person, but yeah, absolutely. And even, you know, like big tech companies, like I think Microsoft were the first. I think they did a program with Harvard University called the Autism Hiring Program, and So they created jobs for people on the autistic spectrum, but it is a spectrum, you know, and there are, like ADHD, you know, and everybody is going to fall somewhere differently within that spectrum.
So how do you get there as an individual who's struggling or who has ADHD, or you just recently found out? How do you get to a point that where you are right now, where you have your self-compassion and you know about yourself and you know this is what I'm going through? What are some of the techniques that you use, especially in your coaching?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, learning about your brain wiring is the most powerful thing, I think, for everybody. Just understanding their own brain and why things happen, and, you know, becoming aware of our reactions to things, and how does that, you know, what feelings does that bring up, and emotional awareness. All of those things together are such a powerful combination. And just even like, you know, self-compassion, self-love, whatever it is, you know, that people want to call it. I think it's often in mainstream, it's shown as, you know, women eating salads and having a bubble bath and stuff, and that's great if that's what you want to do. But I can remember trying those things. I was like, if I eat a salad every day, will I feel better about myself? You know, because that's what you do, right? Because it's these images are just kind of thrown at you, and you think, oh well, you know, I'll try it and see, and you know, I just found it really boring. And so I kind of thought, okay, well, what is it then? What do I need to do? And at the time, my own ADHD coach gave me, you know, this thing. He said, okay, 10 daily habits. What are the 10 things that you're going to make sure you do every day? Things that you get enjoyment from. It could be really small, it could be big, whatever it is, you know. These things need to be prioritized above your work. That's how important they are, because they're a way, every time you do something nice for yourself, every time you give yourself permission to enjoy something, you're giving your brain the message, it's okay for me to do this. This is good, I'm looking after myself. And it just, you know, forms neural pathways. The more you practice it, the more it'll become habit, and the more it'll become natural, and then you'll progress on and on and on, you know, and you'll keep going, and you'll find that the more you let yourself do stuff, the less hard on yourself you're going to be, because you're accepting yourself more, you're not criticizing yourself as much, and you're understanding, oh, I did that because my brain sometimes needs a reminder and I forgot to do that thing. It's not the end of the world. You know, like learning to speak to yourself in that kind of way. But usually the way that it starts off, if I have a client who's like, I have no idea what compassion means, my mind is just constantly throwing out negative thoughts and stuff, because with ADHD, the thoughts usually are veering far over towards negative thoughts. Okay. Memory bias with ADHD is a big thing, and it stops us from being able to remember things that went well. So a pause is like a super basic, and all you're doing is like, you know, for 10 seconds a day, 20 seconds a day, or even if you manage once a week, you know, while you're waiting for the kettle to boil in the morning, or you're brushing your teeth, you're just checking in and you're noticing, what are my thoughts doing right now? Are they lifting me up, or are they dragging me down? And that's it. But the most difficult thing about that is not judging yourself. So you're just being aware. Just trying to notice, like as if you're listening in on the conversation over the neighbor's wall. You know, you're trying to kind of practice as much detached, not emotionally detached, but just noticing without judgment. Because often what can happen is, like, you know, 9 times out of 10, the person will listen into their thoughts and it's something negative, and then they'll get stuck in it. Like, oh no, I can't even do this for 10 seconds, you know. So you're trying to like take that pressure and that perfectionism away and just be like, it's just noticing. There's nothing you have to do about it. The more you do it, the more you'll notice that you're able to like go, oh, that's interesting. There's that thing again I'm thinking about where I think I'm really rubbish at whatever it is, dancing or something, you know. And you'll just, you know, it just gives yourself the message of like, once you stop judging yourself so harshly, it just changes everything.
Actually, I was getting this thought where it's almost similar what you're saying with what Jordan Peterson says. I don't know if you know him, but in his 12 rules for life, he talks about you need to talk to yourself, have a conversation with yourself like you're a third person. be in the kitchen or whatever you're doing as you're saying, and have a conversation with yourself. Okay, Ashley, what are we gonna do today? Do we want to do that? Is that okay? And also reward yourself. If you are going to maybe you want to set some goals for the day, and you do them, and you tell yourself, okay, after we clean the house, we are going to sit down and enjoy a glass of wine. And then you need to reward yourself at the end. Don't go doing something else after finishing cleaning. Sit on the couch and drink the glass of wine as you promised yourself. Because if you keep breaking promises to yourself, then you will lose trust in yourself next time.
Yes.
Just as you would the other person. So do exactly as you said.
Yeah, yes, the consistency, so that you can rely on yourself to show up for yourself.
Just like a kid, when you tell a kid, okay, finish this and I'll give you this, then if you don't, they get so sad, and you kill them a little bit, and they lose trust in you for next time. So treat yourself like that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's a beautiful way to put it. Yeah, it's true.
I was just thinking as you were talking, I was like, wow, this is almost as similar. And I like the point of just listening to your thoughts, being aware, don't judge, don't do anything, just listen and be aware.
And it takes practice. Like that takes
it's easier said than done.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's a slow process, and that's not what that's something that can actually be a real challenge to people with ADHD who are practicing self-compassion, because you'll have this thing of like, the person with ADHD is like, oh, I don't like my life, I'm gonna change everything. Tomorrow morning I'm gonna wake up and everything's gonna be different. And maybe they'll make changes and it'll last for a few days or a week or two, and then it'll fall right back. And that's because of impatience and not being able to see far into the future, maybe far enough into the future that it wouldn't be sustainable. So the small, incremental, consistent changes are the most powerful ones, laying that foundation, and it's just a much more sustainable sort of way of doing it.
I'm glad you touched on that, because I was going to ask you what are the challenges that you face when you try to get into that compassion mode, but you already touched on them. It's really challenging, as we said, easier said than done.
Yes, and it takes patience and also memory. People with ADHD tend to have very poor memory, very limited working memory capacity. Like you could be in one room and think, oh, I need to go upstairs and do something, and by the time you get upstairs, it's gone. But it happens.
Sort of like when you say like, I'm going to get my charger, and then you go upstairs and you're like, wait a minute, why did I come to get here? What was it? And then you go downstairs and you come back like, it was a charger.
Yeah, yes. Having that, like, the consistency of that is just unbelievable. And especially with children, you ask a child, like a child with ADHD, if you ask them to do a task, say an elementary school age child, if you ask them to do a task with 3 steps, they'll probably remember the first step, maybe the second step. And on the way there, they'll have seen a poster on the wall that took their interest, and they've completely forgotten all the steps now. So it's as you're talking, I'm realizing, there are no dumb people. We just labeled them dumb because we didn't understand them. That is the impression that you get from the world when your brain is wired differently and the world is built differently for other people's brains, not for yours. So that is part of, getting the message of you're broken, there's something wrong
telling
with
a fish to climb a tree.
Yes, exactly, yeah, yes. That's a great.
How can the society at large, or communities and even schools, help when it comes to setting better support systems for individuals with ADHD towards their journey of self-compassion?
Yeah, well, absolutely. The most important thing is, the adults around the child, or the colleagues around the person, the family of the person, learning about ADHD, getting to know what their loved one or their colleagues or their child's, triggers are for them, having a meltdown and losing control of their emotions. Where do their interests lie? The more you can help them build their self-belief, the more self-compassion they're going to feel for themselves, because they'll have the opportunities to feel proud, to feel accepted, to feel like they're succeeding, and that they don't have to try 3 times as hard to get to the same place as their peers, which is usually the case.
Yeah. On our episode on boundaries, we were actually talking about the fact that most of the things that we believe about ourselves, we did not tell ourselves that people around us in the society told us that this is who you are. And we ended up believing it, and we ended up labeling ourselves as this is who we are.
Yes.
And I'm so glad you touched on that as well. Like, it's so important to feed your kids positive things about themselves, because it will shape their entire life.
Yes, absolutely. Shape their brain, literally. You know, it's so important.
My other question is, are there any resources or books or tools that you can recommend for individuals seeking to understand themselves better who have ADHD, especially when it comes to self-compassion and in the context?
Sure. I mean, there are, you know, I suppose the first thing that comes to my mind is a website called Additude, ADDITUD, Additude Mag, like short for magazine, .com. They have a lot of great articles on there, a lot of like personal stories of people triumphing, you know, and feeling and restoring their self-belief and building on their self-compassion. You know, there's a lot of really inspiring stories on there. For parents, there's a really good book by a woman called Caroline Maguire. Now the book title is called Why Will No One Play With Me? It's quite a very sad title, but it's actually a really useful book. Ned Hallowell, Dr. Ned Hallowell, usually has a really, really positive, he's written loads of books, Driven to Distraction, ADHD 2.0. He's usually focuses on the strengths of people. How
about in the Czech Republic? Because I know for a fact that you're an ADHD coach, and I have been following your work on social media. Are there any other people, or people can just come to you and you can help them? But what if they want to get other support services in Czech, or maybe they want to see if they have ADHD?
Yeah, yes. I know that, like, I think Dr. Sophia Nam does assessments. I'm not sure if she does them for adults, but she definitely does it for children. And Dr. Rishankova, she assesses children as well for ADHD.
Yeah. And the support services that you do, for example?
Yeah, so as far as I know, there's nobody else in Czech Republic who's a certified ADHD coach at the moment.
Serious?
Yeah, I mean, it'll come, of course, and it needs to, because there's a great need for it, especially one who actually speaks Czech. So, like, definitely, well, like, the most important thing when you're researching where to get an assessment or where to get support, any kind of support, like making sure that the person has like a specialized training in ADHD, or like a specialized, you know, some therapists will have a specialized interest in ADHD, because maybe they have it or a loved one has it, and they're usually the ones, you know, the more information that the person has, the more beneficial it's going to be.
Oh my gosh, I'm surprised that they don't have enough ADHD coaches.
Yeah, I mean it's not a new thing in the States. It's very popular, you know, and it's sort of like part of the treatment, the sort of standard treatment for ADHD. But yeah, when I was doing my training, I think there was one woman from Poland there. I know there's one in Germany, but not many. You know, it's in Europe, it's still a very up and coming.
So there are no like support groups?
I don't know. I think there was one for a while. I'm not sure if it's still happening over the summer.
Wow, it's really sad. But so where can people find you, and maybe you can also elaborate more about your services? What exactly do you do when a person comes to you?
Yeah, it's usually like, so people come to me and sometimes they're in a state of great distress because, you know, things are falling apart in their lives. Maybe they've lost a job, or they ran out of money, they're in debt, or maybe they're giving themselves a hard time because they're late for work every morning. They want to work on that. So first of all, people will have like a free consultation to see, you know, so I can answer questions and to see if we're a good fit, because that's really important. You know, you want to feel comfortable with the person. Both of us want to feel comfortable with each other. So usually people will have at least 12 sessions over the course of a few months, because it's important to do them, you know, at least like twice a month. Otherwise you'll lose momentum.
Yeah, and consistent basically.
Yeah, the consistency and stuff. And obviously, you know, coaching is different to therapy and that, because it's more of a partnership and there's less of a pronounced professional boundary, and it's client led. So, and then the coach is just checking that the client's going where they want to go, going towards their goal, where they want to go, feeding back anything that, notice that. So everything that the client says, I listen through an ADHD lens. And then I'll ask, do you want me, I noticed this is coming up for you, do you want me to explain that through the ADHD lens, what's happening in your brain when that happens? And people are usually really, interested in learning.
I think it's really nice. What's even nicer is that they're dealing with someone who also has ADHD, so you really understand, as you say, you have the ADHD lenses that another person who doesn't have would not understand what's going on right now.
Yes.
So I think it's really nice what you're doing. Continue helping more people. I hope people who didn't even know that there was an ADHD coach can know after this episode, and they can get the help and just an ear from someone who is like them.
Yes, thank you. It's very effective, and funnily enough, everybody, when I did my training on the first day, there were 24 of us, and everybody had ADHD, and I was nearly crying, because it was just like, oh my gosh, these are my people. This is amazing. It was a whole new world.
Sense of belonging, yeah?
Yes, yeah. And yeah, it is very important, or it is very effective. I think people appreciate that when they realize that I have ADHD as well, and
and they open up.
Yes, no judgment, of course.
Unlike you, no judgment. Well, thank you so much for coming to this episode. Thank you for honoring the invitation.
Thank you for having me, Ashley. It's been great. It's been fun.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you want to be a part of our Dear Ladies Network community, visit our website www.dearladiesnet.com or follow our socials on Instagram and Facebook at dearladies.network. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss new episodes. Until next time.